Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Lessons Learned, the dumbest thing I've ever done with money. My name is Suzanne, and I am the head coach at G.R.A.C.E Financial Coaching. And I am so excited to welcome my colleague, Derick Kopp, today. Derick is an exponential coach and founder of Inward Solutions Project. Derick specifically supports visionary leaders in making bigger decisions with the gifts that God has given them. And Derick believes that everyone desires a life of significance. I 100% agree. And living inauthentically can severely cramp your life. Derick works with his clients to create a life of impact, to see opportunities and details in a complex world that they cannot see on their own. I love that, Derick. Welcome to the show. It is so true that sometimes you just need an extra set of eyes to see what you can't see, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. I'll tell you a quick story that brought this to light in the biggest way I've ever really seen it before. I was reading a book about the Twin Towers in 9/11, and it was very impactful. It was like a 400-page book, and the thing I walked away with was probably not what I expected to walk away with. But the people in the tower, when the plane hit the tower, the people in the tower felt their entire life, their entire building shake, but had no idea what happened.
Right.
And they had to call family and friends outside and say, hey, get on the radio, TV. What just happened to my life? The people closest to the source had no idea what's happening. And that's so often true for our lives. We're inside the building, and it's hard to see what's going on sometimes.
Definitely. I have a much less impactful example of that when I'm at a baseball game and suddenly everything stops and the umpires go out and they have a little and you're like, what just happened? Did the pitcher balk? Is the guy not safe at first? Did did one of the managers come out and make a complaint? Like, what's going on? And you have to like pull up your phone and go to Twitter and find out what's happening in the baseball game that you're watching, even though you're sitting right there. So I totally understand that having that outsider's view, you understand the bigger picture, right?
Yeah.
Definitely. So outside of the extra set of eyes, how else do you help your clients through exponential coaching?
So oftentimes it's just bringing a set of eyes that's not tied to the story that they're telling themselves. So often, and this is part of what we'll get into with my story about money, is we bring a story to life and we don't even know it's a story. It's just fact for us. And sometimes even having people ask, through coaching, people have asked me like simple questions like, are you sure about that? In the moment before they asked that question, I was absolutely positively sure about it. But the moment they questioned whether or not that thought, that belief was true, I said, oh, well, what if that isn't true? Right. And sometimes that's one of my favorite questions to ask is that true? Or are you sure about that? Because it stops people in their tracks, and we're like the inertia, right? We just keep on going the same track. And if something doesn't just knock us, we just keep on going because that's all that we know to do. And sometimes a simple question knocks us just a little bit and says, oh, wait, what path are we actually on? What are we actually doing here? And sometimes that, 1 degree shift doesn't feel like a lot, but you play out that 1 degree shift for a month, for a year, for 10 years, and you create a whole different life than the one you were living just because of one question, one perspective and insight. So I like to coach. It's Rich Littman for the coaches watching, right? Coach for insight. One insight can shift my life. One insight has shifted my life, and insights have shifted my life time and time and time again. And it comes with questions.
Right. Now, you started off, correct me if I'm wrong, you started off your coaching life kind of specifically in the financial coaching realm. How did you utilize that coaching, that 1 degree shift, specifically when it came to the financial aspect of those clients that you worked with?
So I wasn't even aware of the 1 degree shift idea when I started coaching. I'm an engineer by trade and training, and I'm really good at numbers and spreadsheets. And I used to pride myself on how great of a spreadsheet I can make. And so when I realized that, there's people in massive financial issues, their problem must be that they don't know how to put a budget together, right? Numbers scare them. Numbers don't scare me. So I decided that I would help them put a budget together and just kind of walk through, this is what we need to do. And I realized that was solving the wrong problem. And so then I started realizing there's so much behavior in this mindset and the story of money that we tell ourselves has everything to do with it. And I started going from, the piece of the money that we can see to the piece of the money that we can't see, but we live out every single day. And when I started getting below the surface of what we do is entirely driven by what we believe. Right. And then I started having conversations that were much more invigorating about what you believe. What do you see? What do you not see? What do I see in what I hear you saying or not saying? And that's when you start getting into how do people actually show up in the world is based on how they believe, what they think. And we just see the actions of it. Well, I went and bought a new car. Well, why'd you do that? Right. And we can trace it back to, I want people to like me. Right. And people don't like me if I don't have new things.
Yeah.
Well, is that true? Right.
Right.
Bam, right there. Let's change the story. And when we can change the story and change the belief, we change the way we act, we change our habits. And by doing so, we change our entire life.
In your coaching experience, how long does it take to get from I bought a new car to I only bought this new car because I wanted people to like me? An hour? A month?
Well, so sometimes the insight occurs right there. And then sometimes it plays out immediately. And other times, I mean, for me, I've immersed myself in coaching for the last 3 years, and there's still things that I'm still seeing that I saw them, 2.5 years ago in one way. And it's like I keep on coming around to this thing, right? And so I make a shift, and then I build my life based on that shift on, I don't have to see that life that way. And then I come around to it again. It's like, there's another shift that needs to occur in that. And so even one, this is from literally yesterday. And this doesn't have anything to do with money, but it's to do with the shift, right? Is sometimes I don't show up fully. Sometimes I don't do my absolute best, because here's why. If I don't do my absolute best and somebody criticizes me, I have a fallback. I didn't do my best. It's okay. Like your critique of me hits my shield of I didn't do my best. I didn't really fully show up. And I've seen that before, but it came up again, right? And so it's now stepping into, okay, I didn't show up my best there. I didn't play all out there. And here's why. Let's shift it next time.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And again, I don't know why I keep, and maybe this is, maybe we can find a new path for you in coaching professional athletes, because I have heard that same sentiment come out of players in their post game conferences, press conferences, particularly in big football games. And the excuse comes out is that we didn't give our best. I didn't give my best. If you're Tom Brady, you may be saying I, depending on how bad your game was, right? If you're one of the lower level running backs, you might be saying we didn't give our best, depending on again the circumstances. But it creates that shield, it creates that barrier to that person saying, I am not a good football player. I don't deserve to be in the NFL. I shouldn't be here playing a playoff game against Tom Brady. So it really plays itself out in every facet of life, no matter what job you do, no matter what you're going to a coach for, whether it's for financial reasons, whether it's for life coaching, career coaching, nutritional coaching. I mean, we know all of these people, but it's so interesting how it goes across the spectrum of all types of problems, all types of people, all types of professions.
Yeah. We all look different. We all act different. We have different professions, but I mean, we're all human beings. We all boil down to this idea about we ultimately want to feel safe and secure. And whether it's a professional athlete or it's somebody at home or somebody in a relationship or a kid going to school and 10th grade math, whatever it is, whatever it takes to feel most safe and most secure, that's what we're going to say. And that's what we're going to do. Right. And if it feels like we have to build up a defense of I didn't do my best so I can just fall back on that, that's what it is. So, yeah.
Do you subscribe to the that what you're talking about is almost kind of a survival tactic, and that lizard brain that some people talk about, how we have our brain that has been evolved and created works of art like Da Vinci and Michelangelo, and then we all have that lizard brain where we go back to survival, like, oh man, I'm a lizard on a wall and something's coming to eat me and a bird's coming to eat me, and I just have to do what I have to do to protect myself in that moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that idea about feeling safe and secure shows up in so many different ways. I think for some people, it shows up in not showing up, right?
Yeah.
I think in some people, it shows up in showing up to the max, right? So just take Michelangelo. I have no idea what his story is, but let's just take him for example, right? Here I am, and I'm going to produce the best masterpiece in the history of ever.
Arguably, for
Why?
sure.
Right? Because it keeps me safe and secure. If I'm like right from Mike, we'll just play into that for a second. But some people show up like what we see on the outside is big time because that is their mechanism to survive.
Mm. Yeah, the perfectionists of the world, the people who go into the job interviews and say, my biggest fault is being a perfectionist.
Yeah,
And it's like,
right.
well, man, you are going to be worn out and stressed out real quick in
Yes.
certain jobs
Yeah.
in life, for sure, in
Yeah.
certain areas.
Yeah. And so I think maybe tying this piece up, I'll just add one more thing
Yeah.
is sometimes people who show up in such a big way to protect themselves, their work is actually learning to show up not so intensely,
Right.
right? To introduce some relaxation into life and realize it's okay to not completely show up 100% of the time.
Mhm.
Um,
Absolutely. Yep. I've experienced that myself recently just with personal stuff going on, that there's been days where I just, I've got so much going on personally that I'm not showing up professionally, and then I get into this cycle of beating myself up, I'm letting people down. But the good part is I have been able to step back and say, "Okay, I've gotten myself into this cycle. Let's break out of this cycle for sure."
right. And that awareness of even being able to see this cycle is massive.
Yeah.
I lived most of my life without even realizing there was a cycle, a story that I was telling myself, right? It's
Right.
just, this is who Derick is. All right. It isn't everybody like this.
Yeah.
And then I would get really, really frustrated when somebody broke the model that I said everybody else was living by
Mm.
because I didn't understand how they could do that. Anyway, yeah. So, but this entire thing comes back to the way that we see life, the story we tell ourselves.
Yes, definitely. Speaking of stories,
Yes.
yes, Derick, I created this show to help people realize we all make financial mistakes and we can learn from the experience of others. So, what is the dumbest thing you've ever done with money, Derick?
Yeah. So I gave this a lot of thought. And because if you look at my life purely from a tactical standpoint and money standpoint, probably the dumbest thing I've done with money is buying a car on a loan, with a loan. We just we've been married a couple of years. My wife and I have been married a couple of years. We're expecting our first son, and I could either have gone and fixed up a car for $1,500, or I could buy a car for $14,000. And I chose to buy the car for $14,000. We sold it 2.5 years later. It was fine. We got over it. And what I found really interesting, though, just as a matter of this is my life, and as I look at others and coach others on their finances, it's oftentimes the vehicles can easily get us into the worst spot.
Mm,
And if we're willing to do something with those vehicles, they can easily reverse our situation the fastest.
yeah. Yeah.
Which was
Right now is
true.
we're recording this in August of 2022, and
Yeah.
right now is still a great time to sell
Yes.
any extra cars you have lying around, because you're
Right.
going to get more than what, either A, you paid for it, or two, it's easily worth right now.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
It's,
I have a,
I think
I have a
it's,
Honda Civic, and
yes. Oh my God. You
right.
could get like 10 grand
And
for a Honda Civic right now.
my goal is to drive it for another at least 6 years, hopefully.
Yeah.
So, but what's interesting for me is when I think about the dumbest thing that I've done with money, it wasn't so much as I got myself in this horrible place financially. My parents were very good with their money, and I picked that up. I'm probably an extreme saver if it was just up to
Okay.
me, right? If my wife wasn't part of the picture, if she doesn't help soften me out and give me a little more experience in life, I'd probably be this guy, this miser with a whole bunch of money in the bank and nothing to show for it, and my
Hmm.
life. But really, I think when I think about poor decisions with money, it comes from having an unhealthy relationship with money. And it's not in the way that you think that most people have an unhealthy relationship with money, right? It's that I didn't know how to spend money on unnecessary things,
Okay.
right? So my parents were missionaries in Africa. I spent the first 8 years of my life living next to, and we weren't in abject poverty, but I mean, I saw what abject poverty looks like.
Sure.
And my parents were very responsible with their money as missionaries. And then I remember, like when I first had my first apartment for a couple months before I got married, I spent like $35 on condiments and stuff at the grocery store, and it killed me. Right. 30, it was like $35, right?
I
And I
have
didn't
actually talked about how when you move, one of the most expensive things nobody pays attention to is refilling your fridge with all the condiments that you just threw out.
Yeah, exactly. And so I saw what it was to not even have the necessities of life. And so I felt bad buying non-necessities in life. My wife grew up in a very financially responsible household, but she has more of a healthier relationship with money, just fundamentally of it's okay to spend money on some things. But I remember, and this is very stark in my memory. This was 13 years ago, and I still remember exactly where I was. It was just dusk outside. My wife had gone into Target to buy something. We've been married maybe 2 or 3 months, and she came out and she had bought a beach bag for $5. And I didn't understand that. Like, I was upset. She spent $5. Now, it's not that we didn't have $5. It's that I didn't understand how you could spend $5 on something that you didn't
Right.
need. We had other bags we could take to the beach.
And
Right.
in her mind, it was probably what a lot of us are thinking right now, where it's like, man, if she got a good beach bag for $5, that's a great deal.
Right. I didn't care about the great deal. We spent
Right.
money we didn't have to spend. Right. And this is my very unhealthy relationship with even being able to spend money at all. And the story I told myself, was people who show that they have too much money, whatever too much money is, people who seem like they have too much money probably have compromised values.
Mm,
Right. That's a story that I learned from different pieces, growing up and seeing and watching. People who seem to have too much money have compromised values. And
okay.
I didn't realize this until just a couple of years ago, quite honestly. But this is a story that I lived into. And so, here we are in the States, graduated from college, got a full-time job, making decent money, nothing crazy, but decent money. And I didn't know what to do with it. Like, I didn't know how to have a healthy relationship with this amount of money. And so my default was just to not spend anything.
Right.
And I didn't realize that people had different mindsets when it comes to money, right? So nerd versus free spirit, saver versus spender, quantity versus quality, experiences versus things,
Right.
right?
Scarcity versus abundance. Right. Absolutely. There's so many
Exactly.
different sides of the coin.
And I didn't even understand that people could have a different perspective. Right? This is how like stuck I was on my perspective, and really it hindered the way I communicated about money with my wife, because I wasn't willing to acknowledge that somebody else could have a different perspective on money and also be right.
And also be
Right.
correct, right?
And I remember we were sitting one day, and this is just a couple of years ago, and we were talking about taking the kids to Disney, which is ridiculously expensive, but let's do it one time. Let's just do it one time. We had the money. Let's go. Let's do it. And I just didn't understand it. And I
Wow.
said, I'd rather save the money and put it towards like a beater truck or something, right? Because I can look at it in the driveway and I can drive it every weekend and I can touch it and I can put gas in it and I can know I bought this thing and I'm still using it,
Mm,
right? And my wife said, but that doesn't matter to me. I like the experience, right? Being able to
right.
look at pictures and say, we did that,
Yeah.
right? And we spent a stupid amount of money for 2 days,
An unbelievably stupid amount of money.
right?
But you know what?
But we
The
did it.
Right, and you did it, and you know what? Your kids, if you only did it a few years ago, your kids were all old enough to remember it,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
You
yeah,
didn't have a 1-year-old, so everybody was old enough to remember it. And Derick, what you did is instead of create that truck in the driveway, you created a story for your grandkids to hear one day
yeah,
about when grandpa took all of the kids, all of the aunts and uncles and mom
yeah,
and dad to Disney World, and
yeah,
they had a great time. And here are some of the pictures.
yeah,
And so I mean, it's, our friend Jason, good morning, Jason, tangibles versus intangibles, but
yeah,
the weight what's the weight of the tangible versus the weight of the intangible, right? You may think we're comparing apples to jalapenos, but we're not.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, the story. So the story, again, so we went on 2 different days. Just we gave ourselves a break in the middle. And the second day we went, it rained the entire day. Like rained. So we had these ponchos, and my father-in-law was with us, and his shoes were all wet, and it was like it's this memory that we'll have forever, right?
Right.
Riding the Slinky Dog from Toy Story ride, and just having the rain just like smashing into our face, and it was way better than the ride without the rain, frankly, right? But it's it's that memory. But me being able to get to the point where I could let go of, I thought spending money on experiences were dumb, right? That's what I believed. But being able to let go of that and say that, well, holding that perspective for me, but being able to let go and say, Katie can have a different perspective and be just as healthy and correct as I am, and let's go live life based on her perspective for a moment. And I enjoyed it, right? It
Yeah.
was fun. And we paid for it in cash. So we came home and we were done, right? But yeah, so just getting to the point of being able to let go of my story is the only story to tell when it comes to money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Adrian, good morning. Your authenticity is refreshing, Derick. It totally is. So Disney was 2, 3 years ago, you said?
It was last November. So it was,
So
yeah,
very recently.
yeah, 10 months ago.
Can you think of any situations since then where you've had to take a step back again and say, okay, maybe my perspective isn't the correct one?
Yeah. So this is a really funny story, and we can just all laugh at it because it's really quite ridiculous. But yet, what it plays into is the how we live based on the story we tell ourselves when we don't even realize the story that we're telling ourselves. So again, go back to the story of people who are seen to have too much money have compromised values. Okay. I have it's a 2009 Honda Civic, and the bumper came off of it, and that's a whole other story how the bumper came off. But let's just go with the bumper came off the vehicle. And I got into a point where through promotions and changing jobs and my coaching business, we were making more money than I knew that we could make. Right? It's not like a ridiculous amount of money, but it's more money than I was aware that I would probably make in a year in my lifetime. And I was getting a little bit uncomfortable, frankly. Here's the money that we're making. So the bumper's off my car. It's a 2009 Honda Civic with 200,000 miles on it. And I left the bumper off the car for like 4 months. No joke. I drove around this with a car with no front bumper for 4 months. And everybody knew it was Derick's car because it doesn't have a bumper on it. And what I realized after like 4 months of just like, and everybody giving me a hard time about my bumper being off my car. It's sitting in my garage, right? It's not that I didn't have the time to put it on. It's not that I didn't have the tools to put it on. It's not that I didn't know how to put it on. It didn't fit the story that I told myself about life. And it was my way of telling the world, don't worry about me. I don't have compromised values. Right? I'm not making too much money.
But the funny part is the other people out there looking at your car didn't know what your income was last year. No, only you did. No.
It was I was living out my story for me. Right? This bumper sitting in my garage was all about me. And satisfying this story that I was living into. And every day that the bumper remained off the car, I was reinforcing the story.
Yeah.
Right. And I finally realized, I made this comment to my wife. I was like, I really should stop cutting grass. Because it's like, well, here's what, 2 to 3 hours. It's like no thinking, right? I say no thinking. I don't have to think about anything specific. My mind just like, wanders around. And sometimes it's like really good ideas. And other times it's like, well, that probably wasn't the best idea to think about to follow through with that thought. That idea will probably never work out. But I was cutting grass one week and I realized, holy cow, this is exactly this. Like I'm playing out this bumper story just for me.
Wow.
And I don't have compromised values.
Right.
So I took 30 minutes or an hour and I put my bumper on.
And now
right?
no one knows it's you when you're pulled up in front of
Right.
Starbucks.
That's except I'm in Georgia and I have a Clemson tag on my car. So,
There you go.
yeah, but it's really, really silly. For 4 months, I played out the story for myself. That if people see me driving a halfway decent car with a bumper on, they might think I have compromised values.
Yeah.
Um,
And I'm going to put that into a story that I would probably tell myself if that had been
mhm,
my car. So
mhm,
many people who watch this show frequently have heard me say, my husband and I, we are married, we have no children, and we have 6 vehicles. We are car people. We are car and motorcycle people. That is our, that is our buying a boat and going out on the boat every weekend. That is our, lifestyle.
mhm.
If one of the bumpers was off, if one of the fenders was off, one of our motorcycles, one of the bumpers was off our cars, that thing wouldn't leave the driveway until we
Mm,
fixed it.
yeah.
And the story I would tell myself about that is not that, oh my God, I can't see people, people can't see me with my car with the bumper off. They're going to think I'm poor. That's not what would go through my mind. My mind would be, I need to be a responsible adult. I need to fix what has been given to me. I need to take care of what has been given to me because I don't know when I'm going to be able to replace it or get another one. I need to take care of my things. That comes from, which I have recognized this already, has come from my father, who was an engineer.
Mm,
And we
yeah.
were taught to take care of our stuff.
Yeah.
That conversation has caused, just like it's caused with you and your wife, myself and my husband, I have been like, no. You can't take that car until it's fixed. You can't take that car until this is done to it. But whatever. You can't, we're not going to do that until we fix X. And it's this story that I tell myself of, you need to take care of your things. You need to
Mhm.
take care of your things because you don't know if you're going to have the money or the time or whatever in the future to replace it. You need to take care of those things. And we're not in a position where I couldn't replace a car if I needed to. But it has been ingrained in me that you need to take care of your things or it reflects poorly on you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And here's the funny thing. So that story was also taught to me growing up,
Okay.
right? The
Yeah.
whole be a good steward.
Yep. Jason, our friend Jason
Yeah.
agrees.
So being a good steward is very important, right? It's part of my mission in life to help people make a bigger impact with the gifts God has given them to be a good steward. And yet the story about money unknowingly overrode the story about being a good steward.
Right.
Unknowingly. I mean, I was living the story out. Yeah, it's and that's where the perspective shift comes in, right? So the moment I realized that I'm telling myself the story and my bumper is helping me live out the story and the story isn't necessarily true, in that moment, I was like, oh, I'll put my bumper on.
Right. Right. It's not like you had to go
No.
find a psychiatrist and sit on a couch for 3 weeks. You were like, oh, well, I can't believe I was doing that. Let me just go put the bumper back on. Isn't that
Yep.
so amazing that we can make that decision in that split second to
Yeah.
change that story?
Yeah. Every story that we tell ourselves, like
Yeah.
that, the moment we see that story in a slightly different way, our decisions start changing. Our filter, the lens that we see the world through, completely
Right.
changes.
Yeah. And do you think that we ever truly, I think in your situation, you made a great point about how this story was overriding this story. Do you think we ever get to a place in life if we work hard enough at it where the story won't be a story anymore? Or do you think it's always back there and we just recognize that that's our story?
I think that we will always be uncovering ways that our stories show up.
Okay.
And I think the work that we get to do is being aware that everything is a story. I just don't know that I always know, at least, that it is a story yet, right? Sometimes I get so steeped in this is the way I see things, right? This is engineer mind can be right and wrong, black and white, 2 + 2 is 4. It cannot be anything else.
Right.
And get so steeped in this idea that I don't even want to begin the process of figuring out if this is a story and what that means or not, So I don't think we ever quite get to the end of all of our stories, but I do think that we can always be aware that there are stories that we can navigate.
Yeah, stories that we've told ourselves, stories that actually did happen, stories that are feeding the plot line of our life. Definitely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome, Derick. I really appreciate your vulnerability today. And usually I ask what you would do to change, the worst thing, the dumbest thing you ever did with money, but it's in your world. It's an ongoing experience, right? And so that's what it is for everybody out there. If you have a story you've been telling yourself that you're broke and you'll never be unbroke, we got to work on that story, right? We got to recognize that story and see how that changes our behavior and work through it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do I have time to share one thing, or
go ahead.
So there's so Ron Blue is Kingdom Advisors, is his group, and he has this H4 4H tool that he talks about with money, and he talks about what is the health of money, right? So we've been talking about money stories and money health. There's 5. I'm looking at my phone here. There's 5 different aspects, competing priorities that we have in our life when it comes to money. And if we want to have a healthy relationship, it's identifying where we stand with each of those 5 competing priorities and putting them in the right place. And these are the 5. To live, right? We need money to live practically, tangibly, enjoy life. Give, right? To live life with open hands, saying this is what I've been given, and yet I'm willing to give it to someone else. Owing debt, right? Minimize the debt, get rid of the debt. It's presuming upon the future that we're never promised. Giving in taxes is a 4th one.
My favorite.
Well, and here's the story twist is the more that we are required to give back in taxes is a measure of the prosperity that God has allowed us.
Oh.
Right. So the more that I'm required to pay in taxes is a reflection of the amount of blessing that God has given me. That's not an easy one to accept necessarily because I hate taxes, but they're required. And then to grow. Financial maturity, right? Growing the savings now, growing the savings for the long-term planning. So live, give, owe debt, owe taxes, and grow. Those are the 5 competing priorities. And you can look up Ron Blue, Kingdom Advisors, the H4 tool, and this will pop up. But you get those in the right places in your life and identify what role each of those are playing in your life. And you can grow into a healthier and healthier story relationship with money in your life.
I love it. I love it. Yes, Adrian sums it up perfectly. This was so valuable. I'll be forwarding this to everyone I know. Thanks, Adrian. Oh, let's see. What's he had to say here? My father-in-law never prayed for more money. He would only pray to be able to increase his tithe. Oh my gosh. How unbelievable is that? That is very powerful. Adrian, thank you so much for sharing that with us. And Derick, thank you again. This was incredibly valuable. I know this one had a lot of live views on it today, and it's going to get a lot of views on the YouTube channel. If you guys signed in late and you missed the first part, just check out the Grace Financial Coaching YouTube channel, and we'll have that link up for you guys later today. Thanks again, Derick.
It was a pleasure, Suzanne. Bye-bye.